Imagine you're looking at a colossal multinational corporation, like one with thousands of employees, massive budgets, and these critical long-term projects that take years to execute.
Right. A really massive, complex machine.
Exactly. Now imagine if by some bizarre mandate, that corporation was forced to completely reorganize its board of directors every 3 months.
Oh, wow. That would be a nightmare.
It really would be. Routine operations would just inevitably stall out. Long-term planning would become basically impossible because of the constant disruptions, right? Like the endless internal campaigning for board seats.
You just have this state of perpetual campaigning instead of actual administration.
Exactly. And that right there is the situation we are unpacking for you today in this War Room session. We are diving deep into the one nation, one election paradigm, or ONOE.
And we really need to look at this not just as, a mechanical change to how citizens cast a ballot, but as a fundamental rewiring of India's governance rhythm.
That's the mission for this deep dive. We're going to extract the strategic framework you need to completely master this topic for your exams. So if running elections every 3 months is so incredibly disruptive, why did the founders build the machine this way? Spoiler alert, they actually didn't.
They absolutely did not. And that is the first critical piece of historical context you need to really lock into your memory. Simultaneous elections were actually the default setting of the Indian Republic.
Wait, really? The default setting?
Yeah, exactly. For the first 2 decades after independence, specifically from 1952 all the way until 1967, the Lok Sabha and the state assemblies went to the polls together. The entire democratic machine was, perfectly synchronized.
So for 20 years, the system operated exactly the way the current government is proposing we go back to.
Right.
What actually broke that synchronization then?
Well, the natural, messy reality of parliamentary democracy broke it. Post-1967, the political landscape really shifted. You saw the rise of regional parties and the advent of these fragile coalition governments in various states.
Ah, I see. So when those coalitions fractured, state assemblies were dissolved prematurely.
Exactly. And then the Lok Sabha itself was dissolved early in 1970. The moment you have a few midterm elections because a government loses its majority, the synchronized clock completely shatters.
That makes a lot of sense. So fast forward, and the push to repair that clock and return to simultaneous elections was formally advocated back in 1999, right? By the Law Commission, headed by BP Jeevan Reddy.
Yes, correct. Which brings us right up to the current momentum, driven by the high-level committee chaired by former President Ram Nath Kovind. The government has accepted their blueprint.
Okay, so if we're building a structural memory layer for you right now, we need to understand the actual mechanics of how you legally force the clock back into sync. You mentioned off-air that we need to amend 3 specific articles of the Constitution and insert 12 new subclauses.
Right, those are your memory anchors. 3 articles, 12 subclauses.
What are these articles actually doing, though? Because you're talking about legally altering the lifespans of state governments, right?
Yeah, that is the core of the engineering problem here. We're primarily dealing with Articles 83 and 172.
Okay, 83 and 172.
Right. These are the constitutional provisions that dictate the 5-year duration of the Houses of Parliament and the state assemblies, respectively. To synchronize them, you have to amend these articles to allow for the truncation or extension of certain assembly tenures.
Just this once, right, to align them with the national election cycle.
Exactly. You're essentially creating a one-time legal override to reset all the timers to 0 simultaneously.
Man, that sounds like a monumental constitutional surgical procedure. And to pull it off, the Kovind Committee didn't just suggest doing everything on a single Tuesday, did they?
No, they broke it into 2 distinct operational phases.
Yeah.
Phase 1 is the heavy lifting at the top, synchronizing the Lok Sabha, the national parliament, with the state assembly elections across the entire country.
Got it. Phase 1 is national and state.
Right. Then you move to Phase 2, which tackles the grassroots layer, the elections for local municipal bodies and village panchayats. The Kovind Committee proposes a legal framework to hold these local elections within a 100-day window following the general elections.
A 100-day window. Okay,
Right.
Let's look at the why behind that buffer. You can't possibly run the local village panchayat elections on the exact same day as the prime ministerial vote, right?
It would be impossible. The sheer administrative weight of managing national, state, municipal, and village ballots simultaneously would just cause the system to implode.
So that 100-day window gives the Election Commission some breathing room to reset the machinery.
Exactly. It's a vital logistical pressure valve. And functionally, executing both of these phases relies on one really massive administrative shift, a single unified electoral roll.
Wait, they don't already have a single role?
No, right now, different tiers of elections can operate on slightly different voter lists managed by different authorities.
Oh, wow. It's like trying to merge three massive corporate databases that were built on completely different software in different decades.
That's a perfect analogy. And you end up with that notorious problem where a citizen shows up to vote for their mayor and their name is mysteriously missing from the local list.
Even though they just voted for their member of parliament, like 3 months prior.
Right, so a single, unified master roll prepared by the Election Commission of India in consultation with state election commissions solves that discrepancy. It saves an immense amount of administrative duplication.
That makes total sense. Now, considering the legal mechanics of this, there's a fascinating nuance regarding federal ratification that we found in the sources.
Yes, this is crucial for the exam. For Phase 1, syncing the national and state elections, the proposed constitutional amendments do not currently require ratification by half the states.
Wait, really? That seems completely counterintuitive. The center can just amend the Constitution to alter state election cycles without the states formally approving it.
Well, based on the specific legal mechanisms and articles being utilized for that first phase, the argument is that it falls within the Parliament's amending power.
Interesting. Okay.
However, for Phase 2, altering the structure of the local bodies and panchayats, that absolutely crosses into the domain of state powers. Therefore, the Phase 2 amendments strictly require at least 50% of the states to ratify them.
And to oversee this incredibly delicate legal transition, an implementation group will be constituted.
Yes, exactly.
Okay, we have the mechanical framework down, the 1967 historical break, the COVID two-phase plan, the 100-day buffer, and the single electoral roll. Let's push for some strategic depth now. Let's get into the significance analysis.
This is where you score the high marks.
Right. The most obvious talking point in the media is always the financial savings. Elections cost thousands of crores. But beyond the money, how does this interlink with national security? Because that really feels like the hidden dimension here.
It absolutely is. If we connect this to the overarching strategic picture, the internal security angle is perhaps the single most critical argument for Onoe.
Okay, unpack that for us.
Consider the reality of a fragmented election cycle. Every single time a state goes to the polls, the Election Commission requires a massive deployment of central armed police forces and paramilitary personnel to ensure the physical security of the polling booths.
Right. For context, we are talking about physically uprooting hundreds of thousands of heavily armed personnel, putting them on trains, and moving them across the country to stand guard outside schools and community centers.
Continually, just constantly moving them. And remember the primary mandate of these forces. They are trained to manage severe internal security threats combating Naxalism, which is the Maoist insurgency in central India, or managing tense border regions.
Or conducting counterterrorism operations.
Exactly. When you have state elections popping up every few months, you are constantly pulling these highly specialized units away from active conflict zones.
You're diluting the security grid.
Right. So Illinois essentially consolidates that deployment into one massive coordinated effort every 5 years, freeing up the security apparatus to maintain a sustained, unbroken focus on actual internal threats.
That is a massive paradigm shift. It's not just about saving rupees. It's about maintaining a secure national perimeter. What about the governance side, though? We mentioned the corporate analogy earlier where routine operations just freeze.
In the Indian administrative context, that freeze has a specific name. It's the Model Code of Conduct, or the MCC.
Right, the MCC.
The MCC is a set of strict guidelines that kicks in the exact moment the Election Commission announces poll dates. It essentially puts the ruling government in a straitjacket.
Because they're strictly prohibited from announcing new financial grants, laying foundation stones for new projects, or making ad hoc appointments, right?
Exactly. The intention there is solid. It's meant to ensure a level playing field so the party in power can't use taxpayer money to buy votes at the last minute.
But the unintended consequence is severe. If you have an election somewhere in the country every quarter, you have bureaucrats constantly sitting on their hands.
Right. You can't execute critical development projects because the MCC has triggered a nationwide or statewide policy gridlock.
Policy gridlock. That's a great term to underline.
Definitely. Synchronizing the elections minimizes that customary slowdown to just a few months every 5 years. It allows the executive branch to actually concentrate on long-term administration. Furthermore, it directly tackles the ingrained culture of freebies and populist economics.
Oh, let's unpack that connection. That's a huge point.
When a political party is facing an electoral test every few months in some state or municipality, there is an overwhelming, relentless pressure to roll out short-term populist giveaways.
You mean like subsidies, free electricity, cash transfers?
Exactly. Simply to woo the immediate electorate. It becomes a race to the bottom. If elections only happen once every 5 years, that continuous pressure evaporates.
So governments are incentivized to focus on inclusive growth, infrastructure, and solid capital expenditure, rather than just short-term voter appeasement.
Right. Not only that, but having a fixed, unmovable election cycle severely limits the political dark art of horse trading.
Oh, right. Because if elected representatives know they can't just force a lucrative midterm election by switching sides and collapsing a coalition government, the incentive to defect drops significantly.
Exactly. You also have to factor in the societal fabric. Elections in India are intensely passionate, highly contested, and unfortunately often polarizing events.
Yeah, campaign rhetoric frequently accentuates deep-seated fault lines around caste, religion, and communal identity.
Right. Having these polarizing events constantly flaring up somewhere in the country keeps the social temperature artificially high. Condensing the electoral cycle could significantly improve social harmony simply by reducing the frequency of these highly charged flashpoints.
Okay, the strategic argument for administrative efficiency, uninterrupted internal security, and social harmony is incredibly robust. But here is where it gets really interesting, and where we have to critically evaluate the roadblocks.
We definitely need to look at the challenges.
Because this vision sounds almost utopian. I have to push back on the accountability front, playing devil's advocate here. Isn't frequent voting the ultimate feedback loop in a democracy?
That is a very valid point.
Right. If a government knows it doesn't have to face the wrath of the voters for another 5 years, no matter how poorly it performs, doesn't that breed immense complacency?
That tension is the absolute crux of the debate. It is the critical evaluation layer you must articulate clearly in your answers. You are constantly balancing administrative efficiency against democratic accountability.
And structurally, this rubs directly against Article 1 of the Constitution, which defines India as a union of states.
Right. India's federal architecture is uniquely designed to respect massive regional diversity.
Because the underlying issues that drive a state election, water rights, local infrastructure, agricultural subsidies, they are vastly different from national narratives like defense spending or foreign policy.
Exactly. The fear from regional stakeholders is the blending of those issues.
Yeah.
If a citizen is walking into a booth to vote for the prime minister and their local chief minister on the exact same day, the massive emotionally resonant national narrative will almost certainly overshadow the regional nuances.
The local issues get swallowed whole by the national megaphone.
Precisely. And beyond the philosophical debate over federalism, there is a brutal logistical and constitutional dilemma here.
We talked about amending Articles 83 and 172 to get everything perfectly synced, but what happens on day 101? What happens if a state government, say, a fragile three-party coalition collapses entirely in year 2 of the 5-year cycle?
That is the structural nightmare the framers of ONOE have to solve. If a state government collapses mid-tenure, what is the legal remedy? Do you impose president's rule, which means direct control by the central government for 3 whole years just to wait for the next synchronized national cycle?
That feels deeply anti-democratic. It completely disenfranchises millions of voters for years.
Exactly. Alternatively, do you hold fresh elections just for that one state? If you do, the entire synchronized clock is broken again, and we are back to square one.
Or, heaven forbid, you force the entire country to vote again just because one state collapsed.
Right. Navigating midterm collapses without destroying the ONOE architecture is incredibly complex. Then you add the physical hardware logistics on top of that constitutional puzzle.
Oh man, the hardware. We mentioned the 100-day breather, but just Phase 1, voting for the national and state governments simultaneously requires a staggering scale of technology.
Let's look at the EVMs, the electronic voting machines.
And specifically the VV pieces, the voter verifiable paper audit trail. For those who might not know, the VVPD is the highly sensitive printer attached to the machine.
Right, when you press the digital button, it drops a physical paper slip behind a glass window so you can verify your vote was recorded correctly. It is a vital piece of integrity hardware.
Currently, a standard polling station uses one EVM and one VVPAT machine. To hold simultaneous elections, the Election Commission has to instantly double its national inventory.
You need two distinct, highly secure sets of machines at every single booth. One program for the state candidates, one program for the central candidates.
We are talking about manufacturing millions of new, highly sensitive microchip-driven machines. You need a massively expanded pool of polling staff trained to manage dual systems without confusing the voters.
Exactly. You have to coordinate the secure armed transport of double the materials. And post-election, finding secure, climate-controlled, paramilitary guarded warehousing to store millions of extra EVMs for 5 years is a colossal infrastructural hurdle.
It requires immense capacity building within the Election Commission. Now, I want to bring up one more roadblock from our sources that completely blew my mind because it's so counterintuitive.
Oh, the economic argument.
Yes. We spent the first half of this briefing talking about election spending as a terrible financial drain. But there's a fierce economic debate suggesting that all this frequent campaign spending actually acts as an informal economic stimulus.
It is a really fascinating economic paradox. Consider the sheer volume of money political parties and candidates inject into the system during a campaign. They are spending billions on massive rallies, hiring transport fleets, printing materials, and local media buys.
Think of the local tent vendors, the caterers, the private bus operators in rural areas. For them, an election season is a massive cash injection. It directly boosts private consumption at the grassroots level.
And that spending generates tax revenue. So eliminating frequent elections might actually remove a recurring stimulus from the rural and semi-urban economy.
While that is true, the counterargument from an administrative perspective is that this informal stimulus is chaotic, highly inflationary, and ultimately unproductive capital.
Right. It's not building a bridge or a hospital. It's printing pamphlets and renting loudspeakers. Sustain long-term capital expenditure by a stable government without the interruptions of the MCC is far more beneficial for structural economic growth.
That is a phenomenal debate to keep in mind. Okay, we've mapped the 1967 history, the COVID policy blueprint, the security benefits, the federal friction, and the EVM logistical nightmare.
Let's pivot to application. We want to convert this into a high-scoring answer preparation system for you.
Exactly. If you are sitting down in an exam hall or drafting a policy brief, how do you structure this for maximum impact?
You have to build an interlinking engine. Never treat O&E as an isolated political event. You must connect it to broader governance patterns. Use administrative vocabulary.
So link ONOE to things like ease of governance, connect it to inclusive growth by highlighting this shift away from freebie economics.
Right, and definitely center the national security angle.
Let's run a quick simulation. You have a tight 150-word quick strike requirement. The clock is ticking. What is the structure?
If you only have 150 words, you cannot afford fluff. Do not waste ink on the 1952 history. Your introduction is simply the Ramnath Kovind Committee mandate the signals immediately to the examiner that you are current.
Got it. Start with Kovind.
Then you move straight into 3 dense body arguments. 1, governance efficiency, specifically naming the end of MCC gridlock. 2, hit them with a curveball. Most will write about saving money, but you pivot to the internal security benefit of freeing up central police forces. That makes your answer stand out.
That's a great tip. And the third argument.
3, the federal and logistical challenges, citing the EVM inventory in Article 1.
And you're way ahead.
Your conclusion focuses entirely on institutional strengthening. Recommend massive capacity building within the Election Commission to handle the transition.
Perfect. Now, what if we need to go deeper? Like a comprehensive 250-word analytical answer.
Here you have the space to open with the historical context, contrast the pre-1967 synchronized norm with the current disruption. Then you break the analysis into distinct dimensions: political, economic, and security.
Right, the dimensions give it structure.
Then you dedicate a specific, highly technical section to the challenges, explicitly naming Articles 83 and 172 and the VVPAT scaling issue. Your recommendations must focus on building consensus among regional parties to protect federalism.
And you conclude with the ultimate philosophical balance, reconciling national administrative efficiency with regional democratic voices.
Exactly. This is exactly how you elevate a generic answer into a strategic policy analysis. You don't just list facts, you show the causality.
You show how the physical deployment of EVMs directly connects to the constitutional friction of Article 1. Using terms like capacity building and policy gridlock marks you as a high-level analytical thinker.
It demonstrates that you understand the machinery of the state, not just the politics of the day.
All right, we are entering the final revision capsule. We are going to rapid-fire the closing briefs to lock this directly into your memory before we end. Let's hit the 5 must-remember facts.
Fact 1, 1967 was the final year of the natural synchronized election cycle.
Okay, 1967.
Fact 2, the 1999 BP Jeevan Reddy Law Commission was the first to formally advocate a return to this system. Fact 3, the Ramnath Kovind Committee designed the current operational two-phase blueprint.
Got it.
Fact 4, there is a mandated 100-day buffer window required before holding local municipal and panchayat elections. And fact 5, the absolute non-negotiable logistical requirement to double the national inventory of EVMs and VVPATs.
Excellent. What is the one probable exam question you need to be ready to tackle?
Critically analyze the logistical feasibility and federal implications of transitioning to simultaneous elections in India.
And the 5 analytical keywords you want to ensure are underlined in that analysis.
Synchronization, Model Code of Conduct, Article 1, Union of States, Policy Gridlock, Capacity Building.
Here is your 30-second last-minute revision summary. The one nation, one election paradigm aims to restore the pre-1967 electoral rhythm to end policy gridlock, curb populist freebie economics, and free up vital national security forces.
Yeah.
While the Kovind Committee provides a clear two-phase blueprint utilizing a single unified electoral roll, the transition faces staggering logistical hurdles regarding EVM deployment and profound constitutional friction regarding federal accountability and the management of premature assembly dissolutions.
Ultimately, it is a profound test of balancing centralized administrative efficiency with decentralized democratic voices. That synthesis captures the entirety of the strategic landscape.
It really does. True knowledge is being able to hold those competing realities, the efficiency versus the accountability in your mind simultaneously, which leaves us with one final thread for you to mentally unravel.
The provocative thought.
Exactly. Think back to that fear of the blended narrative we talked about. If the massive national issues, the macro-level defense strategies, international trade agreements, the giant economic narratives continuously share the exact same ballot as the state issues, well, what happens to that grassroots leader?
It's a tough question.
What happens to the local representative desperately trying to campaign on fixing a broken water pipe or funding a village school? Does their highly specific, localized voice get permanently drowned out by the sheer, overwhelming volume of the national megaphone?
Something to really think about.
Keep connecting the dots, keep challenging the structural assumptions, and we will catch you on the next deep dive.